long as you're happy, you're always gonna grin. You get out what you put in. You get out what you put in. Never gonna lose, never gonna win. Long as you're happy, you're always gonna grin. You get out what you put in. You get out what you put in. You get out what you put in. Oh, I've been looking forward to this one. I've got Mark Williams with me today. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Hello, Ashley. Leeds. That's a bit of a football reference in case anybody doesn't understand what that means. If you know, you know. Great to be here. Was that you singing on the intro?
Yes, it was. Yeah, that's my song played on the guitar
beautiful
behind me.
I thought it was Bob Dylan for a second there.
Bless you. That's very kind of you. That's very kind of you. Well, that's how I got my name for my business, because the song's called Full Cup. It's a self-penned song all about why I'm so positive and I always look on the bright side of life, and it's not a glass half full, it's not a glass half empty, it's a glass half full. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't think when I named it Full Cup that I'd ever use it as my business name, and I didn't realize that Full Cup has other connotations, but hey, we won't go there.
Yeah, let's not go there.
Anyway, Mark Williams, for anybody that hasn't a clue who you are, they must have been living under a rock, but go on, quick introduction, who you are, what do you do?
So I am a LinkedIn trainer, independent LinkedIn trainer, and I, since 2008, have been doing that. And I'm also the host and producer and general dog's body of the LinkedIn Form podcast, which is soon to be renamed. But I can't tell you what that is just yet.
Oh, I was hoping to get an exclusive, Mark.
Yeah, I think I'm going to announce it at Uplift Live, I think.
Oh, that's a great link. Uplift Live. Tell us about that. What's this all about?
It was a good link, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I've not been asked to do that. Just literally, that is the truth. I think that's where I'm going to announce it. So this wonderful conference has been put together by friends of ours who decided that we needed a conference for LinkedIn enthusiasts in the UK. And I've been to other such events in other parts of the world, but just was astonished there was never anything like that in the UK. But there is now, and we're all meeting in a few weeks' time in Birmingham, which will be great.
It's come around really quick, hasn't it?
I know, absolutely. I've been preparing my slides and stuff like that.
Yeah, how are you going to manage to talk just for 30 minutes, Mark?
I have no idea, Ashley. Honestly, I couldn't believe it when it came through. When John Asperian, this is first sort of contacted me about it, I'm sure he didn't say it was half an hour. I'm sure it wasn't. But I think, as I said on my podcast recently when I was talking about it, that it's actually quite a good concept, because what you're going to get is a lot of different perspectives on LinkedIn through a day. And so you get to hear lots of different people from all around the world. We've got some fantastic speakers. I mean,
it's incredible.
It's quite some lineup. And so, yeah, I mean, for me personally, half an hour is a serious challenge. I'll barely get into slide number 3 in half an hour, but there you go. I'll have to be very disciplined and practice a lot. So,
and are you staying over any of the nights?
Yeah, night before and night after. There's no way I'm driving back after that. I was chatting the other day with Louise Brogan about it, and who's also one of the speakers. And she'd said that a friend had contacted her who was in the Birmingham area and said, "Oh, we should go out that night." She went, "Are you kidding? I will be absolutely exhausted
on my knees."
Like, I'm the same. There's no way I'm driving back. I think I'm probably one of those people that psychologists describe as an extroverted introvert, in that some of the characteristics of an introvert are that you find being in other people's company utterly draining, which I absolutely do. But at the same time, you appear very extroverted. And I think that probably sums me up. You know, like if I'm doing training and stuff like that, I mean, all right, you're on your feet and everything, and you're kind of performing for a long period of time. But it's also the people interaction. And I'm absolutely out of it. Absolutely out of it. Very dangerous to drive. I'm all right sitting on a train, I suppose. But so, yeah, no, I'm staying there the night after as well.
So maybe we can grab a beer.
Yeah, I'm sure we will.
Chat about all the things that I've been listening to on your podcast. So your podcast, right? You've been doing that forever. why did you start thinking of doing a podcast? Because there couldn't have been many podcasts around back then.
Well, there were quite a few, but I mean, obviously nothing like what there is today. There certainly wasn't any on LinkedIn, which was part of the motivation, I guess. I'm a big podcast consumer, was then. It was 2013 we're talking about when I started, and I've been listening to podcasts for a while. It made perfect sense to me that television had developed to a point where we could subscribe to things and choose what we watch when we want to watch it, not have to get the Radio Times out and decide on a certain time of day and make sure we're there to watch it. Things have moved on, but radio hadn't really. And so, but podcasting was that, and there was this great opportunity to listen to what I wanted to when I wanted to, and multitask it, and listen, do other things, walk the dog, go for a run, drive the car, whatever. And so I used to listen to all kinds of, interesting podcasts that were teaching me things and inspiring me in different ways. And of course, I was teaching people about LinkedIn, have been since 2008. And I thought, wouldn't it be great, for people to be, driving their car somewhere on a 2-hour journey or whatever, and listen to a podcast all about LinkedIn and giving them ideas on things they could do. So obviously in those days, more so than now, perhaps, there were some technical barriers, I guess, things that I had to kind of get my head around. But thank God for a guy called Pat Flynn, who still runs a podcast called Smart Passive Income, which gives you an idea as to the kind of mindset I had at the time about making money online and all this stuff that I've since grown out of. But he produced a set of videos that I think they might be on YouTube still now, I'm not sure, in how to set up a podcast. And I was like, great. And I literally followed it step by step. And it wasn't, there was a few little bits and bobs that took a bit getting my head around, but it wasn't that difficult really. And yeah, the first episode was sort of back end of 2013. I sounded awful, and I wanted to get past the pod fade period, which certainly in those days was 7 episodes. They reckon most people don't get beyond 7 episodes. And I was quite determined that I'll do that. I thought I'll get to 20. I think I actually said this in the first episode. I'll get to 20 and then make a judgment on whether it's really worth my time. And by that time, I'd fallen in love with it totally. I guess for me, I've never been great on a keyboard. I can't touch type. And so I've never enjoyed typing out content. I clearly, as you will well know, enjoy the sound of my own voice. But also I found the medium as a way of expressing yourself, just a lot more natural, certainly for me anyway. And so it just suited. I felt like I could just let rip on what I think, and just
and you
be
do.
myself.
You do. And I think that's why we love your podcast, Mark, because you'll challenge some of the things that LinkedIn do, or some of the things that some of these so-called specialists are saying. So like, right, yeah, and you'll make us think. I'm sort of like, yeah, that's a blinking good point, Mark. I'd never have thought of it like that.
Yeah, no, I have. I think that's true, and I think also the opposite works as well, and I'm cool with that. So, I've had people contact me and say, I completely disagree with your point on, and and that's great, and I welcome that kind of debate. Sometimes it's not a debate. Sometimes it's I'm never going to listen to you again, and that's the end of that, and that's fine as well, because you can't win everyone. I'm not really trying to win anyone, really. I'm trying to be myself and share what I think about things. And obviously, I've been doing it a long time. Have been by the time I started the podcast, and obviously, now I've been doing this an awfully long time. And so, you get a kind of feel for things, over time. And so, sharing that and the experience and the knowledge of what's happened in the past and how LinkedIn have changed and the direction that they take and the decisions that they make, and you kind of get a sense of where they're going with something. And so that helps me put a perspective on things, I think, that's a little bit different from perhaps what you'd hear from other people.
Yeah, and you've got an awful lot of regular contributors, haven't you? That get involved. They send you stuff. They help you. You often have John on as for a chat, and I love those episodes. So it's like a community. It's not just a podcast; it's a community, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and you always get that. I think with all types of content, there's going to be a very small vocal minority who are contributing all the time. There's people that send me messages on a very regular basis, and sometimes it will be. There's a guy called Mark Lee who I actually interviewed for Interesting People. That's sort of in the bank and come out.
Oh, that's another scoop. Excellent.
Yeah,
excellent.
And Mark's very, he's an accountant by background. He's very kind of matter of fact about things and looks at things very logically, which is quite different to the way I look at things. So he will literally send me a message and say, I disagree with this, but I absolutely agree with this. They're often voice messages while he's out walking. John Asperian does the same thing, actually, and that he often sends me voice messages while he's out walking. And I really like that because, I've always appreciated that kind of feedback where sometimes they say, that was brilliant, I really love that. And sometimes I'll say, wasn't sure I agree with this on that. But I think when you are authentic and upfront and straight and you just give it how you see it, then I think that creates debates. If you think things through too much, as I tend to do with written content, and much more measured in the way you deliver things, that isn't natural conversation, is it? That's not how we normally communicate. So
you're right.
I think people tend not to respond as much if you deliver content in that way. So yeah, I do get a lot. Well, I say a lot. There's as I say, a minority, but a group of people that, and there's other people that don't, but might contact me on LinkedIn and say, I've been listening. I have one this morning, actually. I've been listening to the podcast for 5 years. I've never heard from this person before. And I'm like,
wow.
Isn't that amazing? Like, you've been listening to me for an hour or so every week, almost. For how many? For 5 years? Crikey, that's just amazing. I've never heard from you before.
It's because you're a celebrity, you see. Oh, what if he doesn't write back? Oh my goodness. That's the thing.
I'm nothing like a celebrity. That's the most awkward thing ever, I have to say.
So you
yourself like that.
So you started your podcast, and then you got past 20, and then you got past 100, and you've literally just done 400, and you say you're going to stop at 500. Is that really true, Mark?
No, it's not true. I'm going to stop before that.
Oh, you are? No, you can't. What am I going to do on my walk?
I'll let you into a secret here, not to make you feel bad, but there is a pressure that comes with it that I do really feel. And, I'm reaching the end of my career. I did say I would finish at 500, and I'm looking ahead at how long it'll take me to get up to 500, because I'm just this week going to record 424th. And that's longer than I really want to carry on doing it, if I'm really honest. And it is a commitment, and it's not just a commitment in terms of the time that it takes me to do it and think about what I'm going to talk about and blah blah blah, all the stuff that I'm sure is obvious. But the other commitment is to the listeners, and just the kind of person that I am. I take that really seriously, and it matters to me. And so people will say to me, "You can't stop the podcast," and I'm like, it's a nice thing to say, but it also makes me feel really bad because I will have to stop the podcast, and it's going to be a tough thing when it happens. But at some point, I will have to stop it, and that's just one of those things. And I'm just going to have to, deal with the guilt that comes with that, and that's just the way it is. I can't get away from that.
No, I totally get that. You've absolutely been amazing innings. Just give us a bit of warning, eh? Give us a bit of warning. You're interesting people. You say you've got Mark Lee. We had Nana the other day.
Some guy called Ashley before.
Yeah. How did that all come about? Because that's genius. It was a great conversation. Thank you for having me on your show. But how did all that come about?
And I got such great feedback from both the episodes that have aired so far, yourself and Nana. Well, look, it was a combination of things. It was partly out of necessity. As I'm reaching the end of my career, I am going on holiday more and more, as you might have noticed. And I always feel guilty about that because it means I'm going to miss a few weeks. But the nature of the show is very current. So I record each show for each week because it needs to be current because LinkedIn changes so much. And so I can't pre-record things in advance unless it's the occasional I might do an interview with someone who I think's got something of value to add that isn't timely, if you like, or especially timely. And so I guess I needed something that I could fill the gaps with, right? But that wasn't timely. And so there's partly that, and then partly my observation of content that seems to attract the most engagement on LinkedIn is often personal, where people are revealing more about themselves. And the LinkedIn audience, which is very much the same as the podcast audience, are very attuned to that, very interested in that, and seem to be very, very keen on that kind of content. So it struck me that there was an opportunity there to do that, to feature people, you know, in their entirety, their background, their backstory, who they are, where they've come from, people that we know maybe professionally or maybe on LinkedIn, and revealing a bit more about themselves. It's not everybody's cup of tea, though. I've had quite a lot of positive feedback. I've also had some, you know, it's not, I don't do too many of those. Not specifically about you, Ashley, don't worry, but just generally about the format.
Look, but you've been doing this so long, you know that you cannot please all the people all the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And it's not going to be an every week thing. It's an occasional thing.
It's an occasional thing. That's the intention. And, you know, I think that's all they're saying is, look, you know, you're talking very positively about this format. Please don't let it be the main format type of thing. That's most feedback I've had of a negative nature. And it's not negative, it's constructive, and it's useful to hear that. And it was never intended to be anything more than just the occasional episode. I've got a lot of volunteers who want to be interviewed, which is the surprising thing.
That's
actually.
Brilliant.
That surprised me. And I want them to be a mix of people, not just people that are, you know, using LinkedIn, you know, as part of their job, you know, i.e. people like you and I, but other people that are just LinkedIn users, but have a decent following and have had success with LinkedIn, understanding more about their story. I'm also, after the first 2 episodes, I'm learning as I go through. I've realized that I don't want to focus too much on childhood. I think I've focused a bit too much on that on the first 2. And it's difficult to move past it unless it's like a 3-hour episode.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm trying to skip on a bit to career. I think career and understanding people's career. The one I did with Mark Lee recently was, you know, like less than 5 minutes on his childhood, and the vast majority was more about his career progression, which is a very interesting story. And we didn't get enough of that from you. A little bit, but not enough, and certainly not enough from Nana either. So I'm changing it a little bit as we go along.
I can always come back if you want.
Exactly.
The next episode.
Fortunately, though, I've got such a list of people that want to be on.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Give me a while to get around to it.
So the whole idea of me doing this show is to find out a little bit more about what we can do on LinkedIn. And one of the things that you do an awful lot is talk about Sales Navigator. And I get people on my workshops. And I just do the very basics, you know, getting started on LinkedIn and that sort of stuff. And so, you know, many people turn around to me and say, "Oh, should I have premium? Should I have LinkedIn Navigator?" And for the people that come on my workshops, it's sort of like, no, you don't really need that. If you're doing the right things, you're absolutely fine. Why should someone shell out, what is it, about 70, 80 quid now for Sales Navigator? What do we get for all of that extra money then, Mark?
Yeah, 70 quid a month. It's a lot of money. But it's like a lot of things that LinkedIn do. It's not really geared for people like you or me. It's not really designed for us. It's designed for people working for pretty large organizations with huge budgets, where 70 quid a month is nothing, right?
Sure.
So it's an enterprise product, really. And it was made that way, designed that way, and it's priced that way as well. So, but if you're, well, it doesn't matter who you are and where you work. Is it worth paying, you know, 70? Is there value there? Personally, I think it's probably worth about 30 quid a month, if I'm honest. So I think it is overpriced, but you know, it is good. And I think the answer to the question, you know, should I have premium, is whether that be Sales Navigator or Business Premium. I think the short answer, and of course, it's not a question with a short answer really, but the short answer to that is if you need to ask the question, the answer is no, meaning you haven't used LinkedIn as a free user enough. Clearly by the fact that you're asking me that question. When you are experienced, then you will know whether Premium is right for you. But you might not know whether Navigator is right for you, because that is a totally different user interface. So, so it's worth talking about. I think and we could talk for an hour about it, but I would say if I was to summarize it, it's a tool designed for a targeted approach to business development, right? And what I mean by that is there's lots of different ways of attracting leads or opportunities in business, right? And one of those is activity, visibility, proving to be an expert, demonstrating that you know what you're talking about, building lots of relationships, and all of that stuff in the background. If you get it right, will generate people gravitating towards you, and that is a form of business generation. But to some people, they either don't want to do that, or they need to show their employer that they're doing far more direct actions and being much more targeted in their approach. Okay. And Sales Navigator is really designed for that approach. So it's a completely different user interface, as I say. It looks different, feels different. Even the terminology is different. So a person, what we call people on LinkedIn, are called leads on LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and companies are called accounts, right? So even the terminology is different. Over the years, it's developed, and it's got some really neat features. A few highlights for you. Account mapping. So you can. So remember, an account's a company, so you can map a company out and take all these different contacts. And they've relatively recently introduced this new thing called, within an account map, you can have roles. So you've got decision maker, champion, evaluator, I think, procurement, and influencer, right? So all these people that play a role in the decision-making process. And again, enterprise sales, right? It's designed for targeting large organizations with complex structures and people that you need to identify who's who and work your way through and all that kind of stuff, and like a hierarchy map. So that's a pretty cool feature if that's the kind of organizations that you're targeting. You need that level of sophistication, a bit like a CRM in that regards. But also you've got things like what they call lead alerts. So alerts that are based purely around leads, which are people that you've saved or save leads. So a lead is a person, but a save lead is someone that you've said, I'm targeting that person, right? And so if they post, if they view your profile, things like that, it'll alert you and say, hey, that person that you've saved, because you're obviously very interested in them, they've just viewed your profile. That's a potential trigger point for you to act on that in a direct way, right? So again, targeted. Interestingly, they don't alert you when they comment on a post. Maybe because they probably don't, because the type of person you might be targeting. Or maybe because LinkedIn haven't really thought that one through and understood that that's a really good trigger point, potential engagement opportunity. But, they only really tell you if they've posted in that regards. But also you can get alerts for accounts as well. So if you've saved an account, someone that's posted in that account might not be a saved lead, but from that account, or that account, that company has been mentioned in the news and things like that. So there's, again, little triggers of opportunities for approaching and engagement and conversations that could happen that help you build a relationship, that help you get in with that organization. And when you apply that to your account map and you go, right, well, I've engaged with this person, and and here's an opportunity. That person, they're not an influencer, but they look like they might be a champion because we've got a relationship. So I'll keep engaging with them and build that. Or maybe, I can make an influencer a champion, that type of thing. So, it's much more sophisticated than LinkedIn.com in that regards.
Yeah.
Searching is much more sophisticated as well. You've got, all kinds of different search filters, some clever stuff as well, where you can do a search, normal search, job title, industry, all the things that you do on a LinkedIn search. But then you can add extra filters like someone who viewed me recently, into that. That's quite sophisticated, I think. Someone who follows my company, and then, or someone who fits a persona. I'll come on to personas in a second. Someone that you've viewed or messaged within the last 2 years. That's a filter in a search. Company headcount, so you can filter searches by the size. So people search, but the size of the company they work for. Again, you can't do that on LinkedIn.com. That's pretty useful actually as a filter. And also in account filters, you've got things like headcount, but also headcount growth. They used to have departments as well, but they seem to have removed that. But so you could say, is this department growing? So if you were selling an IT solution, is the IT department growing? But even headcount growth can be useful. If you're an insolvency company and their headcount was negative growth, then you might be interested in talking to that company, etc., etc. Annual revenue, leadership changes, things like that. There are various account filters. Final thing I'd say is this personas. They can define what an ideal client persona looks like by function, seniority, job title, I think, and location. So 4 criteria, and I can say that fits the persona of an ideal client for me. You could then do a search and filter by persona, and you can also tag people as being of a certain persona. So it is quite a sophisticated tool, and certainly if you are very, very targeted in your approach and you work for a company that has a budget that would want to pay £70 a month, then I'd recommend it. But outside of that, do you need it to be successful on LinkedIn? Can you generate a stack load of leads on LinkedIn without touching Sales Navigator? Absolutely, of course you can, without a doubt.
Yeah, and this is what you and I both teach. And your average user, the average people using LinkedIn is the owner or the partner in a business. If the business is big enough to have a business development team or people doing that.
And I think the thing with what you have to remember is that if you are targeting large blue chip organizations, right, typically most people in those organizations aren't active on LinkedIn, right? So how do you engage with them? How do you attract their attention? Right? Sometimes you do have to take a more focused, targeted approach with them, and that's where Sales Navigator's a good tool. Not for the stuff that you generally do around building visibility, but where you can't do that because these people aren't active, so you do have to approach them. You take a more sophisticated approach to that through Sales Navigator.
Perfect. We've almost come to the end of the show already, Mark, which is crazy. So that's what 30 minutes is. So you're ready for Uplift Live. When you speak to somebody and they're sort of like, oh, I'm not sure what I need to do on LinkedIn, what are the 3 things you tell them that they need to be doing?
Well, I mean, again, it depends where they're at. So that would be very specific to them. But generally speaking, make sure they look good. So the profile is, up to speed. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's not the biggest deal, but it's a sensible thing to do. I would then make sure that they are focused on engagement, and then I'll talk to them about content, but it's in that order. So very much focusing on who are you engaging with and who are you building relationships with, because there is, most people aren't that active, and most people that I work with at the point that I'm giving them this advice aren't that active. But if they are, they fall into the trap of, engaging with people that it's easy to engage with.
Ex-colleagues.
And
peer group.
And it can be a bit of an echo chamber. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I would never discourage someone from doing that. That is actually good work, and it does build visibility. But the bit that they're missing is sort of thinking about how they're building relationships with people that not necessarily just people they want to do business with, but other people that influence people that they want to do business with. And that's a bit more strategic approach to engagement. And then obviously the whole content piece, which people always want to dive into, and I was always careful to pull them back and go, let's make sure you've got a good profile, first of all, that you're building the right kind of network, and that you're really thinking about who you're engaging with. And then we can start talking about content, which is a huge subject in its own right. And, I'd give them feedback on what they've done previously, et cetera, and then build it there. And if I take one point on content, I think that the best bit of advice, as a very simple piece of advice, is that when you're producing content, you're doing it for your audience, not for you.
Yeah.
And that, I know it seems obvious when you say it, but so many people and so much content on LinkedIn, you go, why is that for me?
Yeah.
None of that is for me, right? That's all about you. And people don't realize that or think that way because they've got a kind of marketing mentality when they approach LinkedIn. But you've got to have a networking mentality. Talk about things that are interesting to your audience. It's focused on them. And if it is, then that's how you build visibility and relationships.
No, absolutely brilliant. A lovely way to end the show, because next week I've got Odessa Sherrod on the show. I've got a little slide here to let you see her. So she's coming on to chat about it, and she is a content writer. So we'll take this conversation even further. And the thing is, I actually recorded that show yesterday because I'm actually away next Tuesday. So we had a really, really in-depth conversation. So that'll be a good episode. Mark, thank you so much for coming in and saying hello and sharing your wisdom. And I look forward to meeting you in real life. We've never met, have we?
Yeah. Big hugs.
In a few weeks' time. You're a hugger, are you? Good man.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
So anyway, thank you very much indeed. And see you soon.
Good man. Thanks. Cheers, Ashley.
Cheerio now. Bye-bye.
You get out what you put in.